Well, hello, everybody. Let's take a break from all the craziness and just the awful things that are going on in the world, all the anger and hate, destruction. Let's crawl into another chapter of Ken Schoolin's book, The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, a free market odyssey. Hopefully, this will be a little escape for you. I'm going to try to make it the same for me. Chapter 38, The Democracy Gang. A democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. Thomas Jefferson. Jonathan didn't have time to say hello. Someone screamed, "It's them! The Democracy Gang! Run for cover!" "Run, run!" shouted a kid who sprinted past Jonathan. Alyssa's face lost its color. "We've got to get out of here fast." First to disappear were the police. The crowd scattered in all directions, many of them shedding their back braces to run faster. 3 whole families, with children in tow, raced down the stairs of Block B, while some tossed belongings out of the windows to friends below. All gathered what they could and dashed up the street. Moments later, the street was nearly empty. Only the slowest, their arms laden with bundles or children, could still be seen heading away from the approaching threat. A structure at the far end of the street burst into flames. Frozen with fear, Jonathan grabbed Alyssa's arm, demanding, "What's going on? Why is everyone so scared?" Tugging wildly against his grip, Alyssa yanked Jonathan to his feet and cried out, "It's the Democracy Gang! We've got to get out of here, quick!" "Why? No time for questions. Let's go," she shouted. But Jonathan refused to budge. Scared to death, she cried, "Let's go, or they'll get us." "Who?" "The Democracy Gang. They surround anyone they find, and then they vote on what to do with them. They take their money, lock them in a cage, or force them to join their gang. There's nothing anyone can do to stop them." Jonathan's head was spinning. Where were those ubiquitous police now? Can't the law protect us from the gang? "Look," said Alyssa, still wriggling to escape Jonathan's hand. "Run now and talk later." "There's time. Tell me quickly." She looked over her shoulder. She swallowed hard and spoke frantically. "When the gang first attacked people, the police hauled them into court for their crimes. The gang argued that they were following majority rule just like the law. Votes decide everything. Legality, morality, everything." "Were they convicted?" asked Jonathan. By now the street was completely deserted. "Would I be running now if they had been?" "No, the judges ruled 3-2 in the gang's favor. Divine right of majorities, they called it. Ever since, the gang has been free to go after anyone they could outnumber." The senseless rules and ways of the island finally got to Jonathan. "How can people live in a place like this? There must be a way to defend yourself." "Without weapons, you can only flee or join another gang with more members." Jonathan loosened his hold and they both ran. On and on they went, up alleys, through gates, around corners, across plazas. Alyssa knew the town as well as she knew the back of her hand. The two kept running until they were exhausted. Finally, well beyond the streets and houses, they climbed a steep cliff, hoping to reach safety high above the town. The last rays of sun died in the west, and Jonathan saw fires breaking out in the town below. Sounds of distant screams and shouts occasionally floated up to their perch. "I can't go any further," gasped Alyssa, her long brown hair draped over her shoulders in a tangle. She leaned against a tree, panting to regain her breath. Jonathan sat down exhausted and braced himself against a rock. In her mad run, she had torn her frock and lost her shoes. "I wonder what happened to my family," she worried. Jonathan worried too. He had thought about the old couple who had taken such good care of him the night before, and their little grandson, Davy. Every individual seemed helpless in this strange world. Alyssa, too bad you don't have a good counsel to keep the peace. Alyssa stared at Jonathan and sat down next to him. You've got it mixed up, she said, still trying to catch her breath. She pointed in the direction of the riots. For as long as anyone can remember, people have learned to take from each other by force. Who do you suppose taught them? Jonathan frowned and answered, You mean someone taught them to use force against each other? Most of us learned it by example every day. Why didn't the Council of Lords stop them? Said Jonathan. The council is force, said Alyssa emphatically, and most of the time it's used against people instead of protecting people. She saw Jonathan's blank look. He obviously didn't have the slightest idea of what she was talking about. She pushed her forefinger into his shoulder and said, Listen, when you want something from another person, how could you get it? Still feeling his bruise from the robber, Jonathan responded, You mean without a gun? Yes. Well, I could try to persuade them, answered Jonathan. Right, or I could pay them. Yes, that's a kind of persuasion. How else? Go to the Council of Lords for a law? Exactly, said Alyssa. With government, you don't have to persuade people. If you get the Council of Lords on your side, either by votes or bribery, then you can force others to do what you want. When someone else offers the council more, then he can force you to do whatever he wants. And the lords are always the winners. But I thought government encouraged cooperation, said Jonathan. Hardly. Who needs cooperation when you can use force? Responded Alyssa. Anyone with power can win whatever they want, and the rest have to put up with it. It's legal, but the losers remain unconvinced, bitter, and hostile. Alyssa directed Jonathan's gaze to the fires below. Look at the riot down there, she said. Society is torn apart by this constant struggle for power. All over the island, groups that lose too many votes eventually explode in frustration. She sat still for a long time. A tear began to trickle down her cheek. My dad and I have arranged a special place to meet when this happens, but I'll wait until the fires die down. Jonathan sat quietly a long time, bewildered by these 2 long days since the storm. By the time he looked back at Alyssa, she had fallen into a deep sleep. He was very impressed with her, everything about her. As he made himself comfortable, he thought, She's no simple Phoebe Simon. And that is the end of chapter 38. I could not have possibly known when I set out to read this book that chapter would be read today, and that the events in the chapter would so startlingly resemble the things that are happening in my country. And for the same reasons they're happening in the chapter. I don't have an explanation for that. I think it's remarkable. Maybe it's fate. I don't know. There's more anger in the world right now, and especially in the United States at this very moment in time, than I've ever experienced in my life. And I know there have been times when it was probably about this bad. Heard stories about 1968 and all the things that happened that year, but I don't know. I was born in 1970, and this is as much anger as I've seen, and not unwarranted anger either. Um, just like the chapter said, and I haven't done this with any of the other chapters, but I feel compelled to do it tonight. I'm going to go back. I'm going to read through some of this stuff again, just because I think it's so impactful. Anyone with power can win whatever they want, and the rest have to put up with it. It's legal, but the losers remain unconvinced, bitter, and hostile. And who could blame them? Who could blame them for being unconvinced, bitter, and hostile? I don't have all the answers. I don't think any of us do. I think this book provides some of them. That's why I'm reading it. I think it's a treasure. I think the things that it teaches are lessons that we need to learn. We need to learn them quick. I hope we will. Have a good day, and maybe tomorrow will be better than today was. I sure hope so.